Today we take a look at the events that took place in the American state of Florida. 28-year-old Laura Pietscher was last seen on October 16, 2018, at a bar in Sebring, where she went to have dinner. 3 days later, an employee at the Tampa restaurant called 911 after discovering something strange near a dumpster. Detectives used surveillance footage to solve this case. Laura Pietscher was a very attractive and always cheerful woman. She was very social. Here is what her father, Art Pietscher, had to say when remembering his daughter. Laura Pietscher was born on a cold Michigan day in 1989. She had an older sister and brother, a sister-in-law, and 2 nephews, one whom she never got to meet. She was born with a short left arm, with a thumb and 2 fingers on her hand. She grappled with discrimination throughout her life because of her physical difference. She was a job coach at Goodwill and worked with physically and mentally disabled people. Even though she was disabled, it never stopped her. It was part of her unique personality. Laura grew up in Michigan. At the age of 26, she moved to Sebring, Florida. She went to Florida because her grandmother was aging and could not take care of herself. Laura, who had a big heart, quit her job and went to Florida to be with her grandmother. It began with a 911 call the morning of October 19, 2018. Restaurant employees said they found the woman's body covered with a plastic bag and concealed beneath a wood board near a dumpster behind the business. A woman called 911 to report a foul odor near a dumpster in a restaurant parking lot. At first, she thought it was a dead animal. But when she got closer, she found what she thought was a dead woman. Detectives arrived on the scene. The victim was found lying face down. She was partially naked. A plastic bag was placed over her before covering her body with the headboard of the bed. She was found wearing a dress. However, the dress was pulled down below her breasts. The perpetrator tied her hands behind her back using a purse strap. Inside the dumpster, they found a clear plastic bag containing personal items, the most important of which was mail, as well as a wallet that eventually contained an ID card. The victim was identified as Laura Pietscher. Detectives determined that she is not actually from Tampa and lives in the city of Sebring, Florida, which is about a 2-hour drive from where she was found. Further investigation revealed that Laura has a pickup truck, a silver Toyota Tundra. She may have come to Tampa in that truck, but her pickup truck was not in the parking lot near where Laura's body was found. The truck was entered into a law enforcement database and registered as a stolen vehicle in case any law enforcement officers saw it anywhere. Meanwhile, investigators interviewed the manager of the restaurant. The owners of the establishment had cleaned the parking lot 2 days earlier on Wednesday. The body was discovered Friday morning. That meant the body must have been placed there sometime between Wednesday and Friday. The medical examiner who performed the autopsy on Laura's body found clear marks on her neck, indicating that she had been strangled with some kind of thin, rope-like object. Other signs on Laura's body helped determine when she died. The skin was discolored, and it was clear that the body had been on the ground for a considerable amount of time. The medical examiner concluded that Laura had died on Wednesday, 2 days before she was found. At the same time, 1,200 miles away in Michigan, police broke the news to Laura's family. It was a shock to her parents. Laura's parents traveled 20 hours from Michigan to Sebring to give investigators access to Laura's trailer. Detectives wanted to see if the trailer was a crime scene. They came in and looked all over the home to see if anything unusual had happened there. However, they found nothing there. Everything was in its place. There was no indication that a struggle had taken place there, which could mean that Laura had been attacked somewhere else. Laura's pickup truck wasn't there either. The investigators knew that in order to solve this case, they needed to reconstruct the chronology of the last hours of Laura's life. They wanted to find out why Laura had traveled from Sebring to Tampa, who she had met, and where her pickup truck had gone. Detectives checked Laura's cell phone records. On Wednesday, sometime between 1 a.m. and 5 a.m., there were phone calls. When she stops answering her cell phone, it obviously indicates that something has gone wrong. Records show that on Wednesday morning, Laura made 2 phone calls to a man named Vidal Cortez. Laura's friends revealed that he is Laura's boyfriend. So a man named Vidal Cortez became the first potential suspect, and detectives wanted to talk to him. They needed to find out when he had last seen Laura and if there had been any problems in their relationship. But before they could find Cortez and talk to him, the police received information that Laura's pickup had been spotted outside a convenience store in Tampa. The detectives went to a convenience store 3 miles from where Laura's body had been found. By the time they got there, Laura's pickup truck was gone. However, there were surveillance cameras outside and inside the store, and the detectives hoped they could get some answers to some questions after watching the footage from those cameras. They saw a pickup truck pull up to the store and park. They tried to zoom in, but the quality of the footage was not the best, and it was impossible to see who was behind the wheel. After the pickup truck parked, a man got out of the passenger seat. This meant that there were at least 2 people in the pickup truck, a driver and a passenger. The man who got out of the pickup truck apparently knew he was being filmed by the cameras. He kept his head down and was wearing a baseball cap. He entered the store, but as before, the quality of the videotape prevented detectives from seeing his face. The image was too grainy. He wanted to steal the beer, but store employees prevented him from doing so. After leaving the store, the man returned to the pickup truck and sat in the passenger seat. The driver did not get out of the pickup truck, and he did not come into view of any of the cameras. About an hour later, patrol officers located Laura's pickup truck. It was parked in the roadway, and it appeared to have been involved in a minor accident. Sitting in the passenger seat was the same man investigators saw on the surveillance footage. At the time of his arrest, he said his name was Calvin Gary. He was on probation and had a tracking monitor installed on his ankle. There was no one in the driver's seat. Only a pair of shoes were left there, and it was obvious that the driver of the pickup truck had fled. Laura's pickup was handed over to forensics so they could thoroughly check it for any evidence, and the detectives meanwhile began questioning Calvin Gary. He said he'd gotten the truck from a man who went by the name Hot. Hot had recently come to the neighborhood, and they were going to steal beer from a convenience store. Detectives asked Calvin Gary if he knew how Hot got the pickup truck. He replied that he didn't know the answer to that question. He said he didn't know anything about Laura. He claimed he had no idea what happened to her. He told detectives that Hot was an African-American male, relatively short in stature. Calvin Gary also told detectives where they could find Hot. They went to the specified address. When they saw them, the man, who was not tall, hid in a thicket of bushes. He hoped the detectives hadn't seen him, but he was wrong. They asked him to come toward them. When the man emerged from the shrubbery, he was wearing a shirt and pants, but no shoes. Detectives asked him to identify himself, but he was uncooperative and would not give his name. The detectives then asked him to walk over to the car. They had special equipment that allowed for quick fingerprint identification. When detectives scanned the man's fingerprint, a match was found in the database. His real name was Gary Danielle. He had an extensive criminal record. He'd already been in prison 3 times. Another notable fact was that Gary Danielle was from Sebring. Mind you, Laura also lived in Sebring. Danielle was shoeless, and detectives assumed he was the one driving Laura's pickup truck. Recall that when the police found the pickup truck, they found shoes inside. Thus, all of these circumstances made Gary Danielle a suspect in the Laura Pietscher case. However, at that point, the police did not have enough evidence to charge him with anything, and the detectives had to let him go. They turned their attention to Calvin Gary, the man who, along with Gary Danielle, used Laura's pickup truck. Because Calvin Gary had an ankle monitor, law enforcement was able to track his movements. They discovered that Calvin Gary had never been to the dumpster where Laura's body was found, and he had never been to Sebring, where she lived. Based on these facts, the police eliminated Calvin Gary as a suspect. After detectives found and interviewed Vidal Cortez, Laura's boyfriend, they ruled him out as a suspect because he had a reliable alibi. But he told detectives that on the evening of Tuesday, October 16th, Laura had visited a bar in Sebring. Because Laura had been at the bar the night before her own death, this information interested detectives, and they went to the bar to speak to the establishment's staff. The manager informed detectives that Laura frequented the bar to grab a bite to eat since she lived somewhere nearby. The last time she was there was on the evening of Tuesday, October 16th. She was friendly and smiling as always, and there was nothing out of the ordinary in her demeanor. Detectives were able to find out that there were surveillance cameras inside the establishment that recorded everything that happened in the bar. They watched the video, which confirmed everything the bar manager said. Laura was wearing the same dress she was found in when the body was discovered. She was sitting at the bar. She was talking to a waitress who was working at the time. She had dinner, she hadn't ordered alcohol, and nothing strange was happening. She did not meet anyone, spoke only to a waitress, and left around 11 p.m. During further investigation, detectives learned that about 4 hours after Laura left the bar, the witness saw her with a man he described as Shorty. Around 2:45 a.m., the witness saw her at a gas station outside a convenience store on the other side of town. Laura was sitting in her pickup truck and was fine at that point. She looked normal, and there was no indication that she was in trouble or that she needed help. The witness also testified that Laura drove off with Shorty. The investigators went to the gas station, as it was the last known place Laura was seen alive. They started looking at the surveillance footage and saw a familiar face. At 2:54 a.m., Gary Danielle went inside to buy cigarettes. He spoke to another customer before leaving. Footage from another camera showed Laura's pickup truck backing out of the parking lot before pulling onto the highway. The footage made it impossible to say whether Laura was inside the pickup at that moment, whether she was okay, and whether Gary Danielle was with her. But it all backs up a story told by an eyewitness who said he definitely saw Gary Danielle and Laura Pietscher together at a gas station near Sebring early Wednesday morning. Investigators analyzed items found in the dumpster, looking for clues that could link Gary Danielle to Laura's murder. There was a partially torn ATM receipt, but it contained information that allowed law enforcement to pinpoint that it was one particular ATM at a gas station in Lakeland. According to the information on the receipt, the transaction was made at 3:30 p.m. Wednesday, 12 hours after Laura was last seen in Sebring. The detectives went to the gas station where the ATM they were interested in was located. They hoped that the surveillance footage would bring them closer to solving the case. Looking through the footage, they saw Laura's pickup truck, but it was impossible to see who was sitting inside. Luckily, there were multiple cameras. After the pickup was parked, the detectives saw Gary Danielle get out and head to the store. He withdrew money from the ATM, bought a soda, and then left the store. Laura did not get out of the pickup truck and was not seen, so detectives assumed she was dead by this time. Gary Danielle got back into the pickup truck and drove in the direction of where Laura's body was found. Gary Danielle was taken to the police station for questioning. At that point, the police only had evidence that Danielle had used Laura's pickup truck, so they began questioning him about the pickup truck. Danielle said he saw an unlocked truck with keys inside and decided to use it. According to him, that's the only thing he did. He had no idea who the pickup belonged to. He said the interior of the pickup truck was fine. He didn't notice anything strange. The detectives then showed him a picture of Laura and asked him if he knew who was in the picture. Danielle replied that he did not know the woman. Detectives asked him if he had ever met Laura in Sebring. He said no. They then informed him that they had a recording made at a gas station in Sebring. The tape has him on it, and the tape has Laura's pickup truck on it. Danielle realized that the police suspected him of Laura's murder, and so he refused to answer any further questions. Detectives at the time had no physical evidence that could prove to a jury that Gary Danielle killed Laura Pietscher. There is a certain time frame within which a person must stand trial. That clock starts counting down after the suspect is arrested. Since the detectives were still waiting for the forensic results, they decided to let Gary Danielle go. Of course, there was a big risk, because Danielle could go on the run, but the detectives decided that in this case the risk was justified. Forensic analysis answered a lot of questions. The experts found drops of Laura's blood in the back seat of her pickup truck. Based on this, Laura's body was probably in the back seat of the pickup truck at some point after she died. Or it could mean that the crime occurred directly in the pickup truck. Investigators have obtained a forensic report on items found near Laura's body. DNA was found on the strap used to bind her hands, and it matched Gary Danielle's DNA. His DNA was also found under Laura's fingernails. The DNA results and surveillance video were enough to press charges, so Gary Danielle was arrested. Danielle said nothing at the time of his arrest. He exercised his right to remain silent. He was charged with first-degree murder, tampering with evidence, and carjacking. Based on the evidence, the investigators tried to build a timeline of the last hours of Laura's life. They knew that Laura was in a bar in Sebring. She was alone and left the bar at approximately 11 p.m. She then went to the town center where she met up with friends. That same night, she met Gary Danielle. They had never met before, and there was no connection between them. Investigators believe Laura agreed to give Gary Danielle a ride, possibly in exchange for cash. Because Danielle refused to answer questions, investigators do not know under what circumstances he and Laura met. But they did know that Laura Pietscher and Gary Danielle ended up at a gas station where an eyewitness saw her alive and unharmed in a pickup truck. Apparently, something happened after they left the gas station. Laura was strangled in her own pickup truck. Where the pickup truck was at the time of her death is unknown. 12 hours after Laura's pickup truck was last seen in Sebring, surveillance cameras captured it at a gas station 25 miles outside of Tampa, where Danielle was withdrawing money from an ATM. Danielle then drove to Tampa. He hid Laura's body next to a dumpster in a restaurant parking lot, and it was found 2 days later. It took almost 3 years after Laura's death before the trial took place. The delay was caused by the world situation. Laura Pietscher's father waited a long time to confront the man responsible for his daughter's death. In court, the father did not condemn Danielle, but instead used his words to talk about the young woman who was lost. Her father recounted a story about a young boy who pointed out her short arm. Another boy told her he had asthma. Her response, "Don't you know there's something wrong with everyone?" Her father brought to court some items that belonged to his daughter. Her journal was among them, emblazoned with the words, "Live the life you've imagined." She jotted notes in it about how she hated cooking because she lived alone and there was no one to do the dishes. She wrote about how she hated littering. She wrote about her 4 tattoos. The most meaningful was a blackbird, in honor of a sister-in-law who died, and inspired by the Beatles song. On August 24, 2021, Gary Danielle pleaded guilty to second-degree murder. In an agreement with state prosecutors, 50-year-old Danielle pleaded guilty to second-degree murder in exchange for a 30-year prison sentence. He also admitted to charges of evidence tampering and grand theft of a motor vehicle. Short, gray-bearded, bald, handcuffed, and wearing orange, Daniel stood quietly in a jury box during the brief court hearing. He said nothing to Laura Pietscher's family. The guilty plea punctuated the case, but it left questions unanswered. Among them, why was Laura murdered? And how did she meet Danielle? Share your opinion in the comments, and thanks for watching this video to the end.